Hi everyone, Niamh here and welcome to my art journaling channel. Today we're going to be looking at abstract mark making, and this was directly inspired by Amber K Creative. She put a video up recently doing something very similar, and I've been in a bit of a funk with what not a funk with what I've been doing, but because I've been doing Inktober, I've been working a lot in monochromatics and I wanted to do something bright and I wanted to use paint, but I wasn't sure where to start. So watching that video just totally ignited my creative juices, and I just wanted to do something in my journal. And I decided for this that I was going to use my large Dina Wakley journal. So I'm starting out with a wide range of my favourite bright colours from the Dina Wakley range, and just really watering them down so they get that almost watercolour effect, and you can see how wet the page is doing this. Now I haven't gessoed this page beforehand because the acrylic paints that I'm using will kind of act as their own gesso in the end. On this page, all I want to do is just to use paint and mark making tools, maybe a few pens over the top, but that's about it. So on the background I've used lemon, lemon, lime, tangerine, ocean, marine, eggplant, not eggplant, blackberry violet, and blushing I think. And just slap them on and put them in together, drying them off a little bit in between, just being careful where I'm putting the colours so that you're not going to get those browns being made, and trying to keep them as bright as possible. Because they are so watered down, it takes a little while to dry, but it's still fairly fast drying. So you can see a whole big bunch of paint brushes I had there, and I actually borrowed a load of paintbrushes from my 2-year-old daughter. She's got these really cheap set of paintbrushes, but when I've been painting with her, I've been just making lots of marks, and some of those paintbrushes make fantastic marks. So I decided that I would go and borrow them while she was asleep and see what I could come up with. Because I am quite short and I've got small hands, I find that kids' paintbrushes really fit my hand much better. I really struggle with long-handled paintbrushes, so it works really well. With this paintbrush in particular, you can see I was sort of pouncing, and it wasn't working the way it was working for my 2-year-old daughter. She has used this paintbrush, and the way she's used it, she makes these amazing flower shapes out of that just by randomly just pouncing all over the page. I don't think she means to do it, but I'm certainly very impressed with the results, so that's what I was trying to replicate here. This funny looking paintbrush, if you haven't come across them before, is a silicone brush. It's a mark making tool. You can get them in all sorts of art shops. I know Dina Wakley sells her own silicone tools. This isn't one of hers. They come in different widths and different lengths. They've got a sharp point on it, so you can scribe into wet paint and make marks that way, or you can use the side of it to apply paint like I was doing there. This is a silicone pastry brush that I thought might be interesting just to do sort of dotty patterns. So I'm just using some gold, I think this is golden iridescent bronze paint, which is one of my favourites for a sort of goldy colour, just to get some stippling effects in the background. The little journal you can see floating around is just my use it up journal, where any extra paint I have I sort of put in there just to make pre-prepared backgrounds, or so I'm not wasting my paint. So with this page, as I went along, I was just trying lots of different stuff that I had on my desk. This is a paint pen marker that I've made up using a really fine nib on it. It's got acrylic paint and some flow medium in it. I'm not sure of the ratios. I know that if you go to Jane Davenport's site, she has a video up on her website on how to make them up. I wasn't particularly measuring anything out. I just sort of put it in so that the paint was fine enough to come through the nib. And you sort of get these really cool fine line effects. But because the paint is acrylic, if you put on a big enough dot, it can dry with dimension. So with this page, I'm just going through and doing as many marks as possible and just trying out different things, overlapping marks, making different shapes, seeing how it all goes together, trying to overlap contrasting colours, so like the pink on the blue or on the purple, so it stands out. So it doesn't sort of blend into the background all that much. Now this page, when I finished, I really like it, but it ended up being one of the I wish you'd stopped earlier pages. You've probably gone a bit too far with it. And again, with this, having a look at it now, there's some stages I think, oh, why didn't I stop there instead of adding pattern all over the page? But the whole process of doing this was to explore different paints, different patterns, and just get out of using one colour and using lots of different colours instead. And also being organic and actually making the marks myself instead of relying on stamps or on stencils or collage papers, actually using the hand of the artist, making it all myself. I may not be happy with all of it, but I know that it came from me, obviously with inspiration from Amber's beautiful work as well. So please, if you haven't checked out her channel, please go and do that, because she has an amazing channel with lots and lots of different stuff on it. So this is just playing around, finishing off the page. You can see I'm overlapping, trying to use some similar themes, so the circles and the squares, trying to sort of stick with geometric type shapes and lines. Here I am getting a bit impatient and wanting things to dry. You can see where I used the paint pens or the nibbed bottles. The paint was still quite wet. Everything else is sort of dry because it's a fairly thin layer of putting it all down. So just using the heat gun in between to dry stuff off, and just checking my other pages to see there was no bleed through as well. So here's going back in with some white acrylic paint and painting over the top. Now this is the one thing that really inspired me about Amber's page, was that the no fear of, you've done this beautiful background and now you're just going to paint over it. And I had this same reaction when I did the Dina Wakely class recently, where we had to do some reductive painting. So you did your background and then you painted out the background to get your final piece. It's something I need to play with a lot more. I really love the effect of it, but it scares me painting over something that I quite like. I think, oh, what if I ruin it? But I should listen to my own mantra, because it's only paint and you can always paint over it again. You can't really ruin what you're doing. So I decided to stick with sort of the circle shapes that I had going on in the background. I like the placement, probably should have thought about how many I put down or varying the size a little bit, but I quite like how it sort of all came together. So with this, because I have been playing a lot with ink, I thought, what would it be like if I put some black ink over the top as well? So I'm just drying off my white paint because I do want it to go on black rather than sort of turn into a grey colour. So the heat gun's taking a little while to dry. So I decided to tip my page up, and I'm just using the pure ink. The other bits in the palette have all been watered down to some aspects. And looking at this again now, I kind of wish I'd just left it like that instead of spraying the water over it. The reason I wanted the water is I wanted sort of these drippy effects and lines going through it. So I got some more of that geometric shapes happening on the page. And it was a cool effect. I wasn't thrilled with the bleed through, particularly on the left hand side up the top there with those 3 circles. So I go back in and try and be a little bit more controlled with the drips and how they were happening, and sort of join it up a bit more, and I was a little bit happy with how that happened. The other thing that I was really careful to do was to start connecting to the edges of my page, so things weren't floating in the middle of the page, that those circles there are anchored to the corner of the page in some way, shape or form. So by putting the black on, it suddenly made my page quite dark again. I really loved the contrast of the white, and I needed to think about how I was going to put that back in again. The gold that I'm stippling on here is actually a gold gouache, which I've never used before. I bought a packet of it because it looked intriguing when I bought it. I actually thought it was a gold ink, and when I got it, I realised it's gold gouache. It dries with the texture on it, and it's actually a little bit sticky to the touch, so I'm not sure how I'm going to use that in the future. This is how I brought the white back onto the page. I just used my paint palette, my paint screed, my paint bottle straight. Use the paint straight from the paint bottle. Get it out, Niamh. So use that sort of as a scribbling tool. This is a piece of sticker paper, and it's one of my background pages that I use with leftover paints. I stick it into one of my smaller journals, and when I'm painting and I've got ink and so on, I put it in. So it's a page I've scanned in, and I just decided to put this quote printed out on top of it, and then I can just stick it down. So it says, "We can choose to stand tall and see life as the colourful and unique mosaic it really is." And I thought that fitted in really well with this page, because it is a bit of a colourful and unique mosaic of lots of different things. I really like that label font, and it was a free font download from one of the very many sites on the internet. So because I can never go on a page without adding text to it, I've decided to do some scribbled journaling around the circles. I'm using a yellow fine Posca paint pen, which my lovely mother bought me a huge selection of the fine paint pens back from her trip that she's just made, and I really love that I've got the yellow now, which is the same as the white, and it works just the same, so that's fantastic and gives you that sort of scribbled writing. I'm just going in and adding just some extra detail to some of the little areas that I thought were a little bit lacking. So this is the final page, just going back and adding a little bit more yellow to the squares, just to pop out some of that brightness again, and using one of my fluoro markers to go through. Mind you, I needed to press down a little bit more because it's a little bit dull. So this is the close-up of the page, and as I said before, it is highly influenced by the page that Amber did, so I please encourage you to go and check out what she did. But it was a very freeing exercise to do, and I really enjoyed it, and it's a nice bright pop in my journal now. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.